The PS3 has a ton of exclusives that people usually talk about, but it also has other ones that really began to gain popularity in these last few years. There are over 100 exclusive games for the console, so it can be a bit difficult to pick out what's really worth playing. I've talked about games like 3D Dot Game Heroes, MotorStorm Apocalypse, and other excellent games that are definitely worth your time, and now I wanted to focus on a game whose demo I played many years back, but I never got around to playing the full game until now. Hey friends, Juan here, welcome back. Today, we'll be talking about a game that its price has definitely gone up in the last year or so, and that is Folklore. I got this game a couple of years ago for around $15 to $20, but now, if you head over to eBay, you're looking at spending anywhere between $50 to $70, which is kind of wild to think about. Everything I'm going to be talking about in this video is mainly going to focus on why I think many elements of Folklore would have made for an incredible sequel. I don't think we'll ever actually get the sequel, but this is always going to be one of those great what-if scenarios because compare Assassin's Creed 1 to everything that it became afterwards. Even though I haven't played those games, I know a lot of people that played the first and said, it's alright, it's a little dull. Then they put out a sequel and everything changed. Now, if the question was, is Folklore still worth playing? I'd say yes, but it's by no means perfect. Let's keep in mind we're going all the way back to the early days of the PS3, where many companies were still figuring out a few things, and although the gameplay is very fun and visually this game is absolutely beautiful, it does have some issues that eventually led me to take a break from playing the game. And before we keep going, if you like what I do, make sure to subscribe, click on that bell, go down to the comment section and let me know. Are you one of those people that you want to get that physical copy of Folklore, but the prices have just gone up so much you don't want that now? Or you've actually played the game and you want to share your experience? And just to be clear, these are all my opinions. And this is also going to be a relatively spoiler-free experience, so I may not show some gameplay or key elements of the story. What is Folklore? This is an action game that was released in 2007, very early into the PS3's life cycle. One of its developers was Game Republic, who are also known for PS3's Genji Days of the Blade. And yeah, we're talking about the giant enemy crab game. They also made this. In this one, you get to play as two different characters. The first one is Ellen, a young woman that's out to find some information about a town, her family, and something that happened 17 years ago from the time of this game. The other character is Keats, a fairly chill journalist that wants to cover some events but quickly finds out there's a lot more happening than what he expected. You can't choose whose perspective you play as first, but just know that you'll eventually have to play as both characters if you want to get to the end. When it comes to gameplay, Folklore has two different phases. The first is exploring and investigation. You spend a lot of time in a small town that's definitely out of the ordinary, meeting its different civilians and asking questions, hoping to find out what really happened there. The second phase is combat in the Netherworld. So the small town you're in is actually connected to another universe of sorts where you can speak to the dead, weird creatures, and find more things about your past as well as other people's. These worlds are packed with very unique enemies that you can battle and absorb. In an awesome way, it kind of feels like playing Pokemon because you can absorb all the creatures you battle and then use them to fight back. Ellen and Keats don't actually fight, but instead, they control these creatures. You can have up to 4 assigned at any given time in your face buttons, and you can change them whenever you want using its own menu. Talking about the visuals, Folklore nails its fantasy-themed world that feels original and is full of interesting-looking creatures. And let's keep in mind this game was released in 2007, which was a time where games had a very dull color palette. Most were brown, gray, and aspired for that ultra-realistic look. So that was a very broad overview of Folklore. Talking about my personal time playing this game in 2021, I have to say I made a decision to purposely stop playing the game at a certain point. Something about my body just told me, dude, it's okay. You've enjoyed the game up until this time. As much as it pains me to say, Folklore is an excellent but flawed game. The concept is incredible. mixing investigation and a Pokemon-style capture system was great. The challenge is the way the story is told is kinda slow and dull. I was legitimately intrigued to find out what happened 17 years ago and where each one of these characters played a part in the overall story. The problem is the pacing is just way too slow. One of the biggest challenges in this game is that you can't play as Ellen or Keats, but you gotta play as both to get the whole story. The challenge with that is when you mix that in with the gameplay, it is just way too repetitive. The game is simply beautiful. When you look at the animation, every enemy is unique, and for every part that I was about to visit, I always ask myself, oh man, the other one looked like this, it had this war setting, what's the next one gonna look like? And more often than not, I was simply blown away because from the music to the visuals, they created very different experiences. The problem with that is that this is easily one of the most linear games that I have ever played. If you've been subscribed to my channel, you know that I prefer linear games far more than open world. I tend to get overwhelmed, overworked, I get exhausted, and I stop playing that game. But more often than not, you can just walk forward and eventually you'll get to where you want. Now sure, everything along the way is beautiful, from the fights to the characters, the environments, and everything is great, but it kind of feels like an illusion. If you were only going through this one area with one of the two characters, honestly, I would not have an issue with that. If anything, that would be great because it is a carefully created experience for that one character. But so many of these times, if you want to experience Ellen's story and then Keith's side of the fence, you are walking through the same areas time and time again. This is not a long game. The average time to beat is anywhere between 7 to 10 hours. Yet I got up to a point where I just said, look, I've gone through this area. I don't want to do it again. It's one thing to have something like a Metroidvania where you get an item and that motivates you to go back because now you have access to a new area. This game doesn't work like that. It is just about traveling forward and moving on ahead. When you switch to the other character and your only focus is I just want to get to the end, I don't even care about what's happening along the way, that's when you know you have a problem. And I want to make something very clear. I really enjoy my time playing Folklore. It was just that after a certain point, I told myself, look, you got your money's worth, you enjoyed the game, you know what you would love to see in a sequel, which is just more lush, open environments, a little bit more variety. But as far as this one, I was good with what I played. And I know for a fact, people, that all of us are subscribed to a YouTube channel that at one point or another in a video, they say the following: this game did not overstay its welcome. What that means to me, especially talking about the length of a game, is that it lasted just long enough so where I wouldn't really start seeing the game's faults, or maybe I noticed a couple of glitches or a problem with the game, but you think to yourself, oh, I only got another hour. And even though I only had about another hour and a half before I finished this game, I don't need more of this because I already know what it's like. What did I do afterwards? I went onto YouTube and I checked out the conclusion. I got my money's worth. I was satisfied because the gameplay, it was not going to evolve anymore. And Folklore has a ton of positive things, which is why I got so frustrated while playing the game. So let's focus on those positive things. The first one, let's talk about those creatures. Not only do they look unique, they actually have different elements, kind of like Pokemon. The same way you would have fire, thunder, water, the same principle applies here. So for some creatures, maybe you'll see that this one does massive damage, but then to another creature, you do no damage at all. So it's all about memorizing some of the patterns and which ones work best for a particular situation. And another pretty cool, albeit slightly frustrating thing, whenever you're about to destroy an enemy, you'll notice it has this pink outline. What that means is that it is time to capture them, my friends. For the smaller enemies, you gotta press a button, and then with the 6-axis of the controller, you just pull it up, and just like that, you absorb the monster. But then, if we're talking about bigger enemies, there's actually multiple different minigames. Some of them require you to shake the controller, other ones back and forth. The thing is that some of the minigames get a little bit too lengthy or frustrating. In a time that PlayStation 3 controllers are definitely going up in price, I didn't want to have to damage mine just shaking it back and forth. So I tried to find workarounds by shaking it as little as possible, and it worked. In talking more about the monsters, you have an incentive to capture more of the same one because on average, if you capture 5 of the same, you'll actually level up your monster a little bit. So that way they do more damage, and there are different items that actually improve them as well. The other thing I loved about Folklore, and it definitely kept me coming back, is the soundtrack. It's beautiful, immersive, and just have a listen. Another thing I loved about Folklore is the diversity in the worlds with the color, the music, the characters. When talking about the story, there's 3 different ways you get to see interactions between characters. For the majority, you'll see this traditional screen with the 2 characters and then some text on screen. Whenever they want to add a little bit more life to that, they switch to a comic book style format, which I love because it's almost like a book, and between the visuals, the art style, and the music, it truly made me feel immersed and I cared about the story. And every now and then you would actually get some cutscenes with full dialogue. And what frustrated me here is that these were freaking awesome. So I don't know if it was a budgetary reason or just some artistic choice where they didn't want to do a lot of this, but I thought it was great because it's got some decent voice acting, especially later into the game, and I don't want to share that now, but damn, there was a lot of potential there. And the last positive thing I want to talk about is I love the maturity of the story. This is an adult-themed thing. There's a lot of mystery, intrigue, allegations, characters that may act one way, but then you find some additional information about them that changes the entire scope of the story. And mixing that with the Pokemon style gameplay, I don't want to just seem too repetitive, but I can't stress enough how much I love the core concept of Folklore. The visuals, everything, it's just, once again, very, very flawed. If the question was, should you play Folklore in 2021? I would say yes, but it's more so with the concept of look at the potential of something that never became. We never got that sequel. We know that back when the PS3 first launched, it did poor sales. It was far too expensive, and this is a fantasy-themed game in a time where a lot of people were caring about the Call of Duties, so this was just way too different for them. If anything, this game made more sense in the PS2 generation than it did the PS3. And if you do want to play this game, I would strongly recommend the following. When I first started to play Folklore, I went back and forth between both characters. I thought that was great because I was going to get the full package, the complete story. The problem was I found myself going back over and over to the same locations, whereas if I had initially played all of Ellen's chapters and then playing all of Keith's, I think I would have enjoyed the story a lot more because there would have been a lot more in between time in those different stages that I already played. So if you're thinking about playing Folklore, another thing you can do is actually head over to the PSN. Remember, that store is still online as of the recording of this video, and the Folklore demo is still available. There's also some free DLC out there on the PSN. So there's the demo, free DLC. Sadly, this game is not available to buy digitally, and as far as I know, it never came out on PlayStation Plus, but Folklore, I'm super frustrated that we never got that sequel. And hopefully all of you enjoyed this different perspective into a game, because you know that I love to talk about positive things on my channel. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great things about this game, but I don't just want to be that person that blindly supports the game without looking at its faults, because imagine that I only talked about the positive things. You buy yourself a copy for $60, if not more, and then you go back here and say, Juan, yeah, those things are great, but buddy, we got to talk about the pacing, we got to talk about the story and these other things. So I feel peace of mind now that I've talked about these different things. So hopefully, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, share, and all of that good stuff. Comment with any suggestions for future videos, and up until next time, thank you for watching and supporting, and take care, everybody.